copper is what allows iron to interact with oxygen safely. So if we think about back to when we were talking about making energy, iron is what carries oxygen, but it can't do that safely. Otherwise, it'll create rust without copper. So copper is really what allows iron to interact with oxygen safely. If not, we create rust. And if we create rust, we create disease. That's, the number one way to trigger, inflammation, an immune system response is to just let iron go crazy in the body. Iron also feeds pathogens and bacteria and viruses and fungi. That's like one of their favorite things to eat. And so if we have an abundance of this, it's going to cause these things to proliferate. It's going to make our immune system probably a little weaker, so we have to think about these things too, and in terms of it's not just it's not so innocent.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode brought to you by Let's Get Checked. You can save 20% off your purchase by visiting tiyLGC.com/PCOS and using the code PCOS20 at checkout. Now I hope you enjoy the episode. In today's episode, I speak with Loren Cruz. Loren is a functional nutritionist who coaches people on how to truly get in tune with their bodies and give new meaning to using food as medicine. She works with clients all over the globe with various goals, helping them take back their metabolism, the crux of health, so they can live the vibrant life they deserve. She's especially passionate about helping women heal post-birth control syndrome, adrenal fatigue, and hypothyroidism, and get their body ready for baby. Hello and welcome to the PCOS Oracle Podcast, Loren. It's such a pleasure to have you on and to be speaking with you today. I've been following your Instagram for a while now, and I just have to say, before we get into the interview, your content is absolutely incredible, and I can honestly say that I'm learning something new every single day from your posts and your Q&As, which you do quite on a regular basis, which I think is awesome. And the knowledge and the content you put up is just empowering. I feel like people are just learning so much from your knowledge and everything that you're putting out for people to learn and be more empowered about what health truly is, and kind of go away from the diet culture and move into actually knowing what health is and how to take care of our bodies. And so I think that's great.
Thank you.
So thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we delve into our topic, which is on iron overload and just general iron, discussing whether it's actually good as we kind of thought or were told, to whether it's maybe not so good and it's harmful. So before we delve into that, can you just kind of share a bit about you, your background, just so our listeners can learn and find out more about you?
Yeah, of course. So I wasn't always a functional nutritionist. My sort of foray into this field started when I wanted to get off of the birth control pill, which I had gotten on when I was in my early 20s for this severe cystic acne that I had developed after coming off of the vegan diet. So it's kind of like a cascade of events that happened, and I could definitely delve into more. But my cystic acne started to come back even while I was on the pill, and I was wondering, why am I even taking this if it's not doing the thing that I want it to do? So I started to do my own investigation. I even spoke to my doctors, and all they could offer me was getting back on the pill. So I decided to come off the pill, and all they could really offer me was getting back on the pill or another pill for my cystic acne, which actually got 10 times worse after coming off the pill, because there's just a cascade of hormonal effects and mineral and vitamin deficiencies that happen there. And as I started to realize what was happening, I was really frustrated with the options that I was being given. So I decided to take things into my own hands and started researching even harder. And, I changed my lifestyle, changed my diet, and I experienced a lot of success just by doing a couple of things. I healed my lifetime asthma through this. And then I decided that I really wanted to help other people do the same thing and experience the same kind of freedom. Because I I was feeling really frustrated with the kind of options that were out there, and I thought there was a lot of misinformation, and that I really thought there was a better way, and I still do think that. So I just wanted to share. So that's how I kind of found myself delving into this area, and so I decided to get my nutritional therapy practitioner certificate from the Nutritional Therapy Association, and I basically pursued other certifications as well after that. So I'm also a root cause protocol consultant. So I went to the Root Cause Protocol Institute, headed up by Morley Robbins. He's excellent. I should say that everything that we're going to talk about in terms of iron, I've learned from him. He's one of my greatest mentors. And so
he's awesome, yeah.
He's wonderful. And right now I'm actually in the midst of getting, I'm in the midst of education at the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Institute. I think it's just FDN though, to become a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. So to bring additional lab testing to my clients and practice and just help us get more answers and more results faster. So I've been really loving everything working with clients. I especially love working with women, especially with the birth control pill, thinking about coming off, preconception, that kind of stuff. That's a true passion of mine just because I've gone through that myself. So, yeah.
That's so awesome. I feel like everyone who ends up going on this road of helping others often comes when you've gone through it and you've struggled to overcome something, and you've seen the power of food and its medicine, and how you can actually overcome certain things and heal your body without medication. Not saying that medication is absolutely, like, no one should go through the Western medicine and use medication. It's just that knowing that sometimes there's alternative approaches that are more getting to that root cause and addressing certain things rather than just slapping a band-aid on it. Like with the birth control pill for acne or for PCOS and getting your period back, when it's all just a band-aid, never actually supports the body to kind of help itself and heal. So I think it's just awesome how you've gone from where you were to what we're doing now and helping so many women and people around the world. It's awesome. I think it's awesome. So so I feel like we can jump straight into our topic, because when you suggested a few topics and I saw this and I was just like, this could be pretty interesting, because I feel like it's something people aren't really aware of, which is unfortunate. Because I feel like we just always kind of push, take the supplement, you need this, you're deficient in this, and people just take it without knowing potential side effects of something and whether people actually need to take a mineral or vitamin. People just assume, they say take it, I'm just going to take it, and people just stock up on a whole cabinet worth of supplements, and you just don't really need it. And right. Your biggest goal is to help people restore their metabolic health, which is, as you say, the crux of health, which I completely agree. And, I feel like people we just see online we've lost sight of what true health is. And as a result, we put our bodies through so much stress, knowingly and unknowingly, and it's impacted our metabolism and health. So as our topic today is on iron overload and the potential side effects of too much iron in the body. Can you just first by explaining like what iron is, so we can kind of backtrack? What is iron and the purpose in the body? Why do we need it or not need it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I totally agree with everything that you said. We're a convenience society, and so we've kind of grown to become conditioned to, okay, I have this problem, let me fix it with this thing, instead of taking a step back and looking at the bigger underlying problem that it could be. Because the deficiency in one thing often doesn't mean that you need to supplement or that you're deficient in that thing. It could mean that you're deficient in cofactors, or it's partners, or it's a lot more complicated. And usually supplementation can lead to more imbalance too. So I'm happy to expand on that a little later. But so iron is a mineral, and it's a pretty important one. Your body uses iron to make hemoglobin, which is a protein in red blood cells that carries oxygen from the lungs to all the parts of the body. And we need iron as well to make myoglobin, a protein that provides oxygen to muscles. So iron's pretty important. It's also one of the most abundant minerals on the earth. So it's kind of funny when, we hear that, oh, so many people are anemic, but I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But what most people don't understand is that, like I mentioned, most minerals and vitamins don't work in isolation. So there's usually something else going on, and iron is very crowned in terms of like energy production, but most people don't realize that what allows it to help us create energy, what allows it to allow us to make energy safely is copper. And copper is kind of like the yin to iron's yang. We need copper in a specific copper protein called ceruloplasmin to actively incorporate iron into hemoglobin and prevent anemia and assist in blood coagulation and blood pressure control and stuff like that. So iron is super important, but also is copper, and a lot of the attention gets placed on iron, but it's often without the nod to copper. And it's kind of been, a little lost in the literature, a little lost in science, and a little maybe even suppressed in some ways, because we have people supplementing iron willy-nilly, and it's just creating more problems. So yeah, we definitely need it, but perhaps not quite as much as copper. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think knowing that copper isn't spoken about a lot and we actually need it, it kind of blows my mind how it's not spoken about a lot, and people are just always pushing iron, and iron is the most important mineral and we need it for energy, and it's like the focal point, and the fact that copper is, like you said, like the yin to the yang kind of thing. It's like you need that balance, otherwise there's issues, and I think it needs to be spoken about more. So I guess, how much iron does someone actually need then? Is there like a specific, would you say there's like a range or something?
Yeah, so this is a complicated question because what most people don't know, and this is why iron supplementation gets recommended so willy-nilly, is that we have a very sophisticated iron recycling system built into our body, and it's called the reticuloendothelial system. So in short, it's called RES, or iron recycling is a much easier way to describe it. But basically it's, it involves a couple of organs like the intestines, the spleen, the bones, the bone marrow, and all of them play a role in helping us recycle iron. So really, if at the end of the day, it's actually able to recycle 24 milligrams of iron per day all by itself. And that well exceeds the recommended allowance for most people. So, ideally, we're supposed to get 25 milligrams per day, let's say. If it's able to recycle 24 milligrams all by itself, and some people even say that it's more, it's almost 30, we should only be getting 1 milligram of iron per day. And that's, that creates a caveat. I'm sure some people are thinking, oh, what about, meat, for example, or steak? Should I be avoiding this? No. Meat and things like that provide a very nutritious source of other minerals, and it's basically iron, but with all of the other minerals that allow it to work properly. So just because, again, it's kind of like, just because we see a deficiency or surplus in something doesn't mean we should avoid it. But meat is definitely a very good source of iron, but doesn't mean we should avoid it. But we do also have this very sophisticated iron recycling system. So a woman or man probably only needs about 1 milligram of iron per day if they're an adult. And then pregnant women, maybe 2 milligrams, because their iron recycling system is just so robust. But really, that's all we need to worry about. And we're able to get that 1 milligram very, very easily through our diet.
Awesome. So I guess, how are we getting so much iron in our bodies? What's the kind of cause? What's the driver that is causing this situation?
Yeah. So right, iron overload is a real thing, and it's pervasive in pretty much all of health problems. All health problems can be connected back to iron overload and excess of iron in the body, because iron, when it cannot be managed properly, just think about what iron does in the air. If you don't take care of it, you leave it out, it gets wet, it just creates rust. That's what happens in our body. And so copper is what allows iron to interact with oxygen safely. So if we think about back to when we were talking about making energy, iron is what carries oxygen, but it can't do that safely. Otherwise, it'll create rust without copper. So copper is really what allows iron to interact with oxygen safely. If not, we create rust. And if we create rust, we create disease. That's, the number one way to trigger, inflammation, an immune system response is to just let iron go crazy in the body. Iron also feeds pathogens and bacteria and viruses and fungi. That's like one of their favorite things to eat. And so if we have an abundance of this, it's going to cause these things to proliferate. It's going to make our immune system probably a little weaker, so we have to think about these things too, in terms of it's not just it's not so innocent. And so, back to your question where you were asking about where we're getting all of this iron. So, it started around 1941 when we started adding iron food shavings to the food system. I believe this happened in Canada, the United States, and the UK, if I remember correctly. And since then, some other countries are a little bit slower to adopt that, like Australia. You won't find as much fortified food, but, it's still very much so growing as a practice. So, iron food filings were added to the food system in 1941. Since then, we've experienced like a 380% increase in iron in our food.
Is there a reason why this has happened? Why they're adding all these? Why they're fortifying foods with iron? Is there a reason for it?
Well, I think around that time, a bunch of scientists and I can't quite remember exactly. There was a cascade of events. Around that time, we discovered that, iron plays a really big role in energy production. But around that time, too, before that, we also discovered that copper also plays a really big role in managing iron. And without copper, there's anemia that gets created. So it's kind of strange that was, some people could say, it's suppressed information. Others could say it's just negligence and, just silliness or oversight. But, we kind of get distracted by these bright, shiny objects in science, especially in health and wellness. And we're like, oh, that thing is so great. Let's just get more of it.
Sprinkle it on everything.
Yeah. we're like little, goldfish. Oh, let's look here. Oh, I forgot, let's look here. Shiny thing. So I think it was, kind of like the next shiny thing. Oh, iron's so good for us. We must fortify it our food. And it was around the Second World War as well. So there's a lot going on there. But, so basically this led to iron fortification of our food, but we also experienced fortification outside of our food as well. So through medications, iron actually is a frequent ingredient in medications, especially if it's pink. That's what gives medications its pink color. And, things like the birth control pill, for example, there's this misconception that, oh, you're bleeding, so you're going to become anemic, you're losing so much iron. That's not true, because we as women have a lot more estrogen than men, for example, that ratio. Men have estrogen too, and so they're not immune to this either. But women have a lot of estrogen in their system, and estrogen actually increases our absorption of iron by 3 times than a man. So we're getting lots of iron to be able to replace that. Pregnant women get 9 times the amount of iron from one meal versus a man. So we're getting plenty of iron through our food. We don't have to worry about it. But because of this way that estrogen impacts our iron absorption, if we're taking the birth control pill, we're also absorbing more iron, because the birth control pill is an extremely high dose of estrogen. So we should have nothing to worry about. But scientists have decided to put 75 milligrams of iron in all of the placebo pills at least. in addition to the iron oxide that's used for coloring. So 75 milligrams is an insane amount. If we go back to what we talked about, you only need 24 milligrams. Our body recycles 24 milligrams all by itself. We only need 1 per day. And the type of iron that's in the pills is not even bioavailable. It needs to be converted into a more safe and usable type of iron by our bodies. And so what needs to happen is copper needs to come into play, but that's just way too much iron, and it overwhelms our copper stores, and it actually causes it to become non-bioavailable, unfortunately. So food fortification, medications. Our water also has iron. I know that Denver, which is where I'm at, it's having a water problem. There's extremely high levels of iron in the tap water. So filters are really good for this thing too. And then we have basically not necessarily things that contain iron, but things that kind of disrupt copper metabolism and allow iron to become kind of this angry monster and create a lot of destruction in our bodies. So what I'm referring to are things like pesticides and herbicides, the use of things like glyphosate on our crops, basically chelate copper, so remove copper, make it unusable from plants and all of our crops and things like that. They actually really impact a really important amino acid that's really important for bone health as well, which is called glycine. But glyphosate is it's got a list of things. I did a research project while I was in school for this, and one of the main things that it does though is chelate copper. So we really want to be buying organic because for this reason, because without copper, it'll contribute to iron overload. So another thing is high fructose corn syrup. Basically keep copper from working, key copper enzymes and key copper pathways from working. So you're going to find high fructose corn syrup and things like, processed foods, processed drinks, things like that. So those are contributing to your iron overload as well. And then we have harmful supplements as well. So, we have so many supplements at our basically to have the option to use them at our disposal. And so the problem with this is too many people think, this thing might help me. I've heard this is good, or, I was told I have a deficiency in this, I should probably supplement with this. Usually it's not the case and what you need to do. So there are a bunch of supplements that I could name that really either impact copper or, contain iron or both. And those are things like multivitamins, so drugstore multivitamins. Those have pretty bad ratios of vitamins, synthetic vitamins. They contain tons of iron usually, and they just have things that we shouldn't be supplementing, and also just really terrible ratios and really poor quality that aren't going to work as well in our body and probably cause more stress on our liver, etc. Prenatals, the same thing. I'm really not a fan of prenatals, although I do really like to work with women in preconception and conception and even postpartum. We usually work on finding food sources of things that they need to support them and their babies, because I do find that prenatals can be really damaging and throw everything off balance. And then we have zinc, for example. I know people, especially now, they've been supplementing zinc because they think it helps the immune system. Zinc is kind of like a sleeper in the immune system. It's really copper that's doing a lot of the work. It's copper that you need to make energy. It's copper that, and energy is what fuels your immune system. So, taking anything that's going to throw that balance off, sure, you can take zinc, and sure, that it may look better on your blood test, but it's not going to support your immune system in the way that you think it is. Then we have vitamin D, for example, and there's so many things I could say about vitamin D. But in short, I'll give you the quick list. The most important thing to me is that it suppresses vitamin A from working, so retinol. And retinol is what actually activates vitamin D, but retinol is also what allows copper to be activated as well. So copper in your body is, just another mineral unless it's able to be transported and input into a protein, a copper protein, and vitamin A, real retinol from animal fats. So not beta carotene. I'm not talking about vegetables or fruits. I'm talking about animal fat that comes from animal proteins, or real animals. That is what really allows copper to work correctly in the body. It helps us create the ceruloplasmin protein, and it also activates vitamin D. Vitamin D supplements also deplete our magnesium. They also deplete our potassium. And, these are really, really important electrolytes that we need to function. And so if we start to play around with these electrolytes and minerals and really knock them down and suppress their function, we're going to see those repercussions. Maybe not right away, but we will see them down the line. And so
when people say that they're deficient in vitamin D, and I feel like recently with this whole coronavirus, everyone's been told supplement with vitamin D will help protect the immune system and you won't get, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess, is the best way to get vitamin D is just from sunlight? Is that the only way that's safe, I guess?
Yeah, yes, I would say sunlight is my first choice. 15, 20 minutes, just have your shoulders and arms and face and even chest uncovered, sit in the sun. And then, that's enough for your day.
Well, for people like in the UK, when there's like pretty much no sun most of the times, what do people do? Like in my situation, what would I do?
That's a good question. So our body has the ability to store vitamin D. It's actually a hormone, and it'll get stored in our liver. And usually what happens is, during the winter months, our liver will release the vitamin D slowly for when we need it. But that said, if you're living in a very, very dark climate, it might be worth investing in a vitamin D lamp, or even if, depending on your health and how it is, you could even play around with going to a tanning salon or going to a UV bed. And so some people might be like, what? But, those things, UV light is really important for us. It's antibacterial, it's vitamin D. So the reason that the suppression of vitamin A is so bad is because vitamin A is what actually activates vitamin D to do all the things that it's so well known for in our immune system and everything else. So, the blood test that we get that just shows our vitamin D levels, that's just usually just storage, unless you have a really savvy doctor that's also testing for active. But even then, the storage vitamin D could be 12 different kinds of storage vitamin D. So it's a snapshot in time, and usually people just trying to take vitamin D supplements to get that number up. It's just kind of like a vanity thing. There's no reason we need to get it up. There's no reason we need more than 21 micrograms per deciliter, I believe, is the measurement. So we need retinol to activate vitamin D, to actually use it and make it useful. And, again, going back to if you live in a dark climate, food sources of vitamin D are really helpful. So dairy is great, eggs are great, organ meats will also have this. And, investing in potentially a UV light of some kind, or making sure you're getting to a tanning salon, as long as your health is well, and we don't have too many polyunsaturated fats stuck in our tissues, we're not overly estrogenic, hyperestrogenism, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's we only need 21 micrograms per deciliter. And so, I think it's overly, the hype on vitamin D is...
Yeah, I think there's even like some studies showing women with PCOS are deficient in vitamin D, and it's like, obviously when people read this, they're like, oh, I've got to stock up on all this vitamin D, and obviously, as you said, dairy has some vitamin D and all organ meats and etc. eggs, and then you got a lot of people bashing that women with PCOS shouldn't have dairy. So it's just like
oh gosh, yeah.
You feel so frustrated, and like it's kind of understandable why women with PCOS are just so confused about, I should take this, I can't eat this, but like it's just, it gets so overwhelming. It's just like, just to help like break it down for women with PCOS who are a little bit like, okay, I'm deficient in vitamin D, but I shouldn't take vitamin D. People say I can't eat dairy, but like it's just like all these little holes that you're just like stuck in. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise out there, and so I totally hear you. At the end of the day, you have to make the right decision for you. I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. So I'm just trying to raise awareness and inform people about, potential dangers of things and how other things might impact other things and work in the body. And yeah, I've heard that dairy thing too for women with PCOS, and I just think it's a boatload of poo. Yeah, dairy is so helpful. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, I went on for a long time about vitamin D, but there are other things that can contribute to iron overload and copper dysregulation. If you want me to keep going.
It's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. Well, I guess also in this season of during this time, people are taking a lot of vitamin C as well.
Yeah.
And so the key there is you need to make sure you're taking whole food vitamin C, because vitamin C that in most supplements, like multivitamins, like prenatals, even in our foods, it's used as, I don't know why, but some kind of preservative sometimes. But usually the ingredient is ascorbic acid, and ascorbic acid is only the outer shell of the vitamin C complex. So vitamin C is actually a complex of things, and it includes things like factor P, factor J, rutin, tyrosinase, which actually has copper in it. And so if we're taking mega doses of ascorbic acid, we're actually depleting ourselves of the very thing, which is copper, that we need to create energy. And so again, it goes back to, are you supporting your immune system or actually harming it? And so in my opinion, ascorbic acid is harmful, especially in large doses. And I would, if you're interested in getting, vitamin C, getting it from food sources like citrus fruits, tropical fruits. Vitamin C is the namesake. It comes from the citrus fruit. So it's, real food sources. And then if not, if you don't have access to something like that, ordering a whole food vitamin C supplement. Then we have things like calcium, fluoride, molybdenum, zeolite, colloidal silver. Those are all things that can also impact copper and lead to iron overload. So those are just a couple supplements that I would name that, maybe are being supplemented willy-nilly. Fluoride, not necessarily, that's in our water, especially here in the US, but getting a water filter as well could help this problem.
Interesting. Glad we touched on the different factors. And I saw your latest post, I think it was your most latest one, is the whole thing about cast iron, cooking with a cast iron. And just for our listeners who might be interested in, be thinking about this kind of question, what's your kind of stance on this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Cast iron. So, we have been using it for thousands of years, yes. But our ancestors that were using it were also not exposed to all of the other factors that we are being exposed to. So I'm not, anti-cast iron. I think if you're in good health, if you're a cycling female, and you're not overloaded with estrogen or overloaded with PUFAs, if you haven't been eating a PUFA-laden diet, polyunsaturated fat diet, and that includes things like canola oil, soybean oil, vegetable oil, seed oils, and things like that, then yeah, probably it's fine to use it once in a while. But if you have definitive symptoms of iron overload, if you have definitive symptoms of hyperestrogenism, or you've been eating a diet full of polyunsaturated fats your whole life, then perhaps it's not a good idea, because depending on the food, especially more acidic ones, there will be iron that leaches into your meal. And, even with a steak, for example, a little bit of iron will get leached onto your steak. Another consideration is the kind of oil that you have to cure the cast iron to keep it from rusting. It's usually what's recommended is linseed oil, which is flax oil. Linseed oil is kind of gross. I'm a painter. That's one of my hobbies, and I use that to clean my brushes. So it's kind of like an industrial oil. And so, you have to replace this eventually. You have to continuously cure your cast iron to prevent it from getting rusty. And you do that with polyunsaturated fats. That's what's recommended. My husband and I have been playing around with coconut oil and ghee to just try to keep that. But if you think about it, you're getting extra iron in your food when you cook with it, and you're getting extra polyunsaturated fats that have been oxidized, and which also cause free radicals, and which can lead to disease. So it really depends on the person, their state of health. There is no perfect cookware too. I will say that. Every cookware has its downsides, like Teflon, it's basically fluoride. Stainless steel, it'll have some chromium and nickel that could potentially leak out into your food. I've been really wanting to try glass. That's the one thing I haven't toyed around with, and I'm very curious to see how that goes. So that's kind of, I'm neutral, and it really just depends on the person.
Awesome, interesting. That'll be interesting to find out more about cooking with the glass. I'll be interested to find out. So I guess we can kind of touch on, so let's talk about what the signs or tests that you can do to check iron, because I know a lot of the most popular one is to check ferritin levels, and then kind of touched on like more about anemia. Like, is it real? What if people actually do have low iron levels, and all these kind of questions that I'm like going through my head.
Yeah. All good questions. So it's funny that you mentioned ferritin. So what doctors used to measure our iron status on was based on hemoglobin until the 1980s, when a Spanish doctor, decided to publish a study, and the scientific community got really distracted and was like, oh, this is like the greatest thing. We should change the way we measure iron. And so since the 80s, we have been using ferritin as a marker. But what is so wrong about this is that 70 to 80% of iron in your body is in hemoglobin. So, if you're going to measure iron, might as well look at the most saturated or the most prevalent place it exists. So unfortunately, we use serum ferritin as a marker for iron status currently. And what's wrong about this is that ferritin is not supposed to exist in the serum. It's supposed to exist inside of the ferritin protein, inside of the blood cells. And so when it exists in the serum, it's indicative of a pathology. So something went wrong and ferritin got discharged into the serum, into the bloodstream. And so that's not good. And what causes this is pretty much inflammation or stress, or excess, and that could be caused by excess iron supplementation. That could be caused by emotional stress, physical stress, nutritional stress, chemical, environmental stress. So there's a lot of things that can lead to inflammation. And so when this happens, there's 2 types of ferritin, actually 3 types, but light chain ferritin just charges iron into the cell and gets secreted out of the blood. And so this is serum ferritin on the blood test. Ferritin gets denatured and becomes this thing called hemosiderin, which is an iron restoring complex. And basically it's like a bank vault without a key. So iron gets stuck and it can't come out. And so the body also increases the production of hepcidin, which decreases the iron circulating in the blood. So basically it triggers, okay, we have a pathology happening. Let's get the iron out of the blood, because remember, iron feeds pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and so the bloodstream is kind of like the highway. And so whenever we have inflammation, or the body senses a danger, it'll remove iron and store it in the tissues because it doesn't want to feed that pathology. It's our body trying to keep itself safe, but by doing so, it can also lead to other things if not remedied quickly. And so basically, there is a really great world-renowned iron researcher called Douglas Kell, and he basically says that ferritin in the blood should be 0. Serum ferritin should be 0. Otherwise, it's indicative that something's going on. So ferritin is kind of like a completely irrelevant marker. And if it's high, then that's a sign that there's probably something really bad going on. So that's a long way of saying that ferritin is not a good marker. So hemoglobin is, and it's around 12.5 to 15.5. That's a good range, I believe. So that's a much better marker for your iron status. But honestly, the iron recycling system and iron itself is just so complicated. There's so many factors. You need to know what your copper status is, your ceruloplasmin activity, even your retinol, vitamin A status, to really understand and get a good full picture of how everything is operating together and where areas of opportunity lie. So the best test, in my opinion, is the full Monty iron panel. And that's going to give you all of those markers. It's going to give you ceruloplasmin, your copper status, your serum iron, your magnesium red blood cell count, your ferritin, your zinc status, your vitamin A status, your vitamin D status, and other iron markers that are just really nerdy. So I won't get too into it. But yeah, that's really the best test to really see what's going on. So if you think you have iron overload, that's a really good one to get checked out.
Awesome. That's interesting. So the full Monty iron panel, for anyone that's interested, I'll put that in the show notes in case anyone's interested. So do you obviously run this and check this with your clients if anyone's interested?
Yeah, I do. It's a really good test to run alongside hair tissue mineral analysis, which is what I also run as well. It gives us a really clear picture of the true stress that's happening in the body, where the exactly how much oxidative stress is being produced in the body. And so, people might be wondering, why is this important? But what's really true about the body is that minerals run enzymes, which run hormones, which run our metabolism. So if you look further down the line, hormones are incredibly important, but usually if there's a hormonal imbalance, there's a mineral imbalance that's underlying that. And so we have to look further and deeper, not just trying to balance hormones willy-nilly, but okay, if we truly want to balance our hormones, we really need to take care of the mineral status of our body, because otherwise they're not going to play nice, and it may take longer, or it may just never happen. So that's why it's so important, and that's why it's enabled me to work with so many people with so many different kinds of health goals and health issues. So that I'm really grateful for being able to kind of like have this picture.
Interesting. So like you said, basically minerals can cause hormonal imbalances. It's basically not focusing so much on the hormones like estrogen and progesterone, trying to figure out ways of increasing or decreasing them, but really going deeper and looking at mineral imbalances through the hair mineral test and things like this, which is quite interesting.
Honestly, I've seen it time and time again. The data doesn't lie. The hair tissue mineral analysis doesn't lie. The full Monty doesn't lie. I'm always able to correlate, okay, this person's metabolism is struggling. I'm able to clearly see they have hypothyroidism, or they probably have a little bit excess estrogen in their body just from looking at the results. So it's really interesting. And from there, we can really create an effective strategy to help impact not only the hormones, but their overall health. Because a lot of people end up chasing with supplements and things like that. And, being able to look at start from the ground up and really build the foundation. And, it's not just about minerals too. It's about building a good nutrition strategy, lifestyle strategy alongside that. So it really helps create a lot of balance in the body.
And I think it's important to be stressing the fact that minerals and vitamins, they all kind of work together. They don't just, you consume a vitamin or a mineral and it kind of it does its own thing. It kind of, like with vitamin A and D and copper and iron, they kind of, everything works together. It's not just everyone just does their own thing. Everything is connected, like with the thyroid and the ovaries and the brain, everything is always connected in the body, otherwise.
Yeah,
how it works. I
It's
think
so,
we need to remember that.
yeah, you're on to it.
So let's kind of discuss where can people find that copper, and how can people start to, I guess, basically just doing what you said about avoiding certain things that are high in iron, but what are some things people can start doing based on like nutritional tips and lifestyle tips to help like decrease iron overload, I guess, or get more of the copper?
Yeah, and that's a good question. I just realized I forgot to answer your question about anemia. So if you have anemia, I will, like, the things that I'm about to talk about after will help. But I do think it's important to address, because I think that anemia is just so common, but what's recommended is iron supplementation, which can often make things worse. So anemia can occur because of so many different things, but it's usually what it comes down to is stress. And so if our food system has been overloaded with iron, depleted of copper. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. But we're also under more stress than our ancestors ever lived through in their lifetime. We experience that in one day. And so when we're under stress and when we're under chronic stress, our body produces a protein called metallothionein, and that binds up copper in the body at 1,000 times strength that it binds up zinc. And so our copper gets bound up. And when this happens, basically going back to even the example that I was giving when I was talking about ferritin, when the body realizes that it doesn't have what it needs to manage iron well, and it thinks it's going to start creating rust, it'll store iron in the tissues so that it takes it away from anywhere that there's oxygen, so that it can keep it from creating rust. Although, it still can happen, it just reduces the chances. So lack of copper and this, stress kind of like induced anemia, it causes iron accumulation in the liver and build up all over the body eventually. So like the pancreas can be impacted, the kidneys, the brain, the eyes. And so, iron will show up low in the blood because that's what we're measuring iron with or for, is with blood. But if you were to take a biopsy, for example, and that's the only way to really get a really actual clear picture of how much iron is being stored in your body, is to take a biopsy of like your liver, for example, but that's incredibly painful and very invasive. That's why the full Monty is just a lot better and easier to be able to understand the whole picture. But yeah, you'll probably see a lot of people have iron in their tissues. And so, that's what's so great about being able to donate blood, which is one of the things that you can do to decrease your iron overload, is that you dump about 250 milligrams of iron. When you do that, I think men have around 5,000 milligrams stored in their body. Women have 4,000, something like that. I think actually it's 3,500 for women, 4,000 for men. So, it's kind of a lot, but not too much where our body will start to collapse. But, if you do feel bad after a blood donation, that's a sign that you probably should do some more work before that. But that's why giving blood is so good, because it restarts and recharges the iron recycling system to start releasing iron from the tissues and then being able to be used again to create new red blood cells. So yeah, that's basically anemia in a nutshell. It's very, very, very rare that it's a true form of anemia unless somebody is not able to digest iron, their food properly and get that iron from their food. So that's intrinsic anemia. They're missing intrinsic factor. Usually it's a vitamin C deficiency, but true anemia is very, very rare, and it's usually due to iron being stored in the body. And so when that happens, that can also lead to disease, which is unfortunate. So back to your...
Are there any, symptoms or signs of anemia, or is it just you have to actually just get like a biopsy? Is that the only...
Oh yeah, symptoms or signs of anemia. I mean, it's basically like what everyone goes to the doctor for. The number one thing people go to the doctor for is fatigue.
Yeah. True.
Fatigue is just it's a short way of saying like you're not able to create energy to meet your demands. And so that's what's happening. That's, of course, like how you live your life and your nutrition plays a huge role. And that's kind of the part of the foundation that I work on with clients, but also your ability to just create energy. Do you have the minerals and vitamins that you need to be creating energy correctly and enough of it to meet your needs? And so with anemia, we're probably experiencing symptoms of adrenal fatigue, which is, just generalized fatigue. And in those cases, we're creating more exhaust than we're creating energy. And so if we're creating, basically exhaust means like free radicals. And so, like I mentioned, copper is what allows us to create energy with iron and oxygen very safely. But if copper is missing, there's going to be skips and steps, and there's going to be reactive oxygen species and free radicals being created. And so we're creating tons of exhaust versus the amount of energy that we're able to produce. So I would say probably fatigue is probably the easiest way to look at it. There's so many symptoms of adrenal fatigue. For example, anemia could be like low metabolism, low thyroid. It could be, usually it's paired with something else because by the time people realize that their fatigue is not normal, it's kind of developed into, it's basically this energy deficit has been able to progress. And so disease is either in its very early stages or it's already hit. And so unfortunately, that's kind of what I would look for in anemia. But yeah, I mean, going back to what you were asking about how to kind of balance iron with like the rest of your, daily life. Well, the good thing is we as women, we bleed monthly, hopefully. So, if you have your cycle, great. That's how you're detoxing iron. If you don't have your cycle, that's just one more reason to fight for it. In addition to the amazing progesterone that you get, and to the amazing GABA boost that you get, and fertility boost that you get. Another thing you can do is to all of the supplements that I mentioned, like prenatals and vitamin D and calcium and ascorbic acid supplements. That's the easiest place to start because you could just stop all those. And so stopping all the things that are disrupting copper metabolism is the easiest way to get started. So usually that just involves stopping a couple things. You don't have to worry too much about adding too much in just yet. So that's a really easy way to start. I would also say managing estrogen levels is really important, and that's a key thing that I work on with women who definitely have iron overload symptoms. And anemia is an iron overload symptom. And so, like I mentioned, estrogen increases our absorption of iron by 3 times. And so being able to detoxify estrogen properly is going to be huge because the more estrogen we accumulate, the more iron we're going to absorb. And so eating frequently or at a frequency that makes sense for you and supports you and your body's demands, making sure you're eating balanced meals. So always a protein and carb together. Fat ratio will always vary depending on the person. And I really can't provide grams for each macronutrient because it's just so different for everyone. But eating in a balanced way, so not just eating carbohydrates or protein alone, is just a really straightforward way to balance your blood sugar and make sure you're able to detoxify. And then make sure you're pooping every day, at least once a day, if not, more. But elimination is huge for getting rid of excess hormones and not allowing them to recirculate in the body. I personally like to have a raw carrot every day. So a lot of people like to do a raw carrot salad, but I just peel a carrot because that's the most sustainable and way I'm going to be consistent. And so I'll just munch on that before dinner. And so those are kind of the tips that I would recommend for detoxing estrogen and just keeping those systems up and running so that we don't absorb more iron than we need. And then I would increase your consumption of copper-rich foods. That's another great way to kind of like enhance your ability to manage iron and just create energy overall, your energy levels in general. So things like organ meats, beef liver are really great. Mollusks, so mollusks are oysters. Oysters are amazing. Clams, mussels, shellfish is great too. So lobster, which if you really want to get fancy, like you can do lobster, or shrimp, or scallops. Vitamin C rich foods. So like I mentioned before, vitamin C is a complex and it has tyrosinase, which has 4 copper atoms at the center. And so real vitamin C organic foods will be full of rich copper. And so again, those are things like citrus and tropical fruits and berries. Those have great content for vitamin C. And then we have chlorophyll, which is another kind of like, it's kind of it's not a huge source, but it's a nice addition because it's also very detoxifying. Just make sure it's chlorophyll with chlorophyllin. And I would just say also reducing stress as well, as much as possible, because remember, chronic stress binds up copper. So just a holistic approach, trying to increase the nutrient density of your foods, trying to avoid the harmful supplements, and just keeping your overall detoxification systems up. If you do have any men that listen to this podcast, I would highly recommend that they donate blood every quarter. That's really because men used to go into battle and get cut on the farms, and now we don't do it at all. And any non-cycling women would also be a really great schedule to get them on. So yeah, those are my recommendations for kind of boosting this overall ability.
That's awesome. I think it's like you said, it's really focused on the whole food, eating nutrient dense foods, and really just focusing on balancing the macronutrients and not just eating carbs on their own or protein on their own, but just eating them together. I think people kind of forget the importance of having a balanced meal, and they just get a carb and they just eat it on its own without thinking, I should add a protein to this just to keep blood sugar levels stable and healthy. And obviously eating more frequently kind of goes against this whole popular belief that everyone should be doing intermittent fasting for the health benefits, when it not saying that there's no awesome benefits to it, but sometimes I was talking about this with Nathan at Kelowna Fitness on a couple of episodes ago, and we were chatting about the different stresses, and he was like, intermittent fasting would be great if you didn't have all these other stresses around.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, I'm all about listening to your cravings, and if you're having trouble making energy, you probably have cravings for carbohydrates a lot. But it's just giving into those cravings, doing it smart. But also, those kinds of diets like intermittent fasting, we don't live like our ancestors did. We experience more stress in one day than they ever did in their lifetime. So you and Nathan are totally right. And the way I look at those kinds of diets, like the keto diet, carnivore diet, intermittent fasting, is those create stress, and then stress binds up copper. So stress and those diets contribute to iron overload. Those diets are included in that. So that's kind of how I view it. And so I would say eat all the food.
Yeah, except the PUFAs.
Yeah, except the PUFAs.
Awesome. So how can our listeners connect with you? Where can they find you?
Oh, yeah. They can find me on Instagram. I'm really the most active there. It's at Innate Functional Nutrition. I do Q&As weekly, and I'm always posting stuff, so that's kind of the place to go. Otherwise, my website's called innate-nutrition.com. So, yeah.
I'll have everything linked in the show notes. Highly recommend following, checking the website out. And if anyone's interested in obviously working with you, or just, doing these tests that we've discussed, then, and you want to find out more about these tests, definitely reach out, contact, email, I guess, or send a DM. I don't know, what's your preferred? I guess email is best.
Yeah, my email is Loren, Loren, as in Nancy, at innate-nutrition.com. So hopefully the spelling is okay. Otherwise, just DM me and we can chat.
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, definitely, I highly recommend. I think it's important to really delve into the root cause of certain things and being aware of the body as a whole and not just focusing on one thing. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me today on the podcast. I learned so much. I was actually just like that the whole time. Like, this is so interesting. I'm sure everyone's been like, their mind's been blown, light bulbs flashing, switching on, and I think it's helps a lot of people. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. This was awesome.